We're on 327.6 today, right?
Sounds right. I think we did 327.5 yesterday.
Okay, yeah, that was Gopal Champu did that, right? Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janabalabha Girivardhari Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Banachari Jaira Da Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Vishupad, Paramahamsa Parvati Po, Tadasata Shri Srimad, Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki, Grantaraj Shrimad Bhāgavatam Ki, Samveda Bhaktivinoda Ki, Gaur Pranam. All glories to the simple devotees. All glories to the simple devotees. All glories to the simple devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnanatimidandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Anmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupaka Damayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhunam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitam Cha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Brindavan Eshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so today we are reading from Shrimad Bhāgavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 27, Text 6. Yamadibir Yoga Patire. Yamadibir Yoga Patire. Abhyasan Shraddhayan Vitaha. Abhyasan Shraddhayan Vitaha. Mai Bhavena Satyena. Mai Bhavena Satyena. Matkatha Shravanena Cha. Matkatha Shravanena Cha. Yamadibir Yoga Patire. Abhyasan Shraddhayan Vitaha. Mai Bhavena Satyena. Matkatha Shravanena Cha. Please chant. Yamadibir Yoga Patire.
Abhyasam Shraddhayan Vitaha.
Abhyasan Shadayanvitaha
मयि भावेन सत्येन
Mai Bhavena Satyena
मत्कथा श्रवणेन च
Matkata Shravanena Cha Yamadibhir Yoga Pathair Abhyasan Shadayanvitaha Mai Bhavena Satyena Matkata Shravanena Cha Yamadibir Yoga Pathair Abhyasan Shadayan Vitaha Mai Bhavena Satyena Matkata Shravanena Cha. Vaishnavis. Yamadibir Yoga Pathair Abhyasan Shadayan Vitaha Mai Bhavena Satyena Matkata Shravanena Cha Yamadibhir Yoga Pathair Abhyasan Shadayan Vitaha Mai Bhavena Satyena Matkata Shravanena Cha Yamadibhihi, beginning with Yama. Yoga Patai, by the yoga system. Abhyasan, practicing. Shradaya Anvitaha, with great faith. Mayi, unto me. Bhavena, with devotion. Satyena, unalloyed. Matkata, stories about me. Shravanena, by hearing. Cha, and. So the translation reads like this. One has to become faithful by practicing the controlling process of the yoga system and must elevate himself to the platform of unalloyed devotional service by chanting and hearing about me. So we can read the translation responsively. One has to become faithful by practicing the controlling process of the yoga system and must elevate himself to the platform of unalloyed devotional service by chanting and hearing about me. So here's Prabhupada's purport. Yoga is practiced in 8 different stages: yam, niyam, asana, pranayam, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. Yama and niyam mean practicing the controlling process by following strict regulations, and asana refers to the sitting postures. These help raise one to the standard of faithfulness in devotional service. The practice of yoga by physical exercise is not the ultimate goal. The real end is to concentrate and to control the mind and train oneself to be situated in faithful devotional service. Bhavena, or bhava, is a very important factor in the practice of yoga or any spiritual process. Bhava is explained in Bhagavad Gita 10.8. Buddha bhava samanvitaha. One should be absorbed in thought of love of Krishna. When one knows that Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the source of everything, and that everything emanates from him, aham sarvasya prabhava, then one understands the Vedanta aphorism, janmadhyasya yataha, the original source of everything. And then he can become absorbed in bhava, or the preliminary stage of love of Godhead. Rupa Goswami explains very nicely in Bhakti Rasamrta Sindhu how this bhava, or preliminary stage of love of Godhead, is achieved. He states, the first one has to become faithful, shraddhayanvitaha. Faith is attained by controlling the senses, either by yoga practice, following rules and regulations, and practicing the sitting postures, or by engaging directly in bhakti yoga as recommended in the previous verse. Of the 9 different items of bhakti yoga, the first and foremost is to chant and hear about the Lord. That is also mentioned here, matkatha shravanena cha. One may come to the standard of faithfulness by following rules and regulations of the yoga system. And the same goal can be achieved simply by chanting and hearing about the transcendental activities of the Lord. The word cha is significant. Bhakti yoga is direct, and the other process is indirect. But even if the indirect process is taken, there is no success unless one comes fully to the direct process of hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord. Therefore, the word satyena is used here. In this connection, Swami Sridhar comments that satyena means nishkapakena, without duplicity. The impersonalists are full of duplicity. Sometimes they pretend to execute devotional service, but their ultimate idea is to become one with the Supreme. This is duplicity, kapaka. The Bhagavatam does not allow this duplicity. In the beginning of Shrimad Bhāgavatam, it is clearly stated, paramo nirmatsaranam. This treatise, Shrimad Bhāgavatam, is meant for those who are completely free from envy. The same point is again stressed here. Unless one is completely faithful to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and engages himself in the process of hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord, there is no possibility of liberation. Imadibir yoga patayar abhyasan shraddhayan vitaha mai bhavena satyena matkatha shravanena cha. One has to become faithful by practicing the controlling process of the yoga system, and must elevate himself to the platform of unalloyed devotional service by chanting and hearing about me. So maybe we can leave the screen on, because I might take recourse to citing some verses that we could put up there for everyone to see. This new chapter is, of course, how one can become liberated from the material world. And of course, as practitioners of Bhakti Yoga, liberation for us means something very different than it might mean for others. Liberation from us means liberation from the false notion that we are enjoyers in this material world and separate from God. We are not enjoyers. We can enjoy, but we are not enjoyers in the sense that God or Krishna is. And we are not separate from Krishna. We are part and parcel of Krishna. So anyone who understands that is already in the platform of Brahman. But one has to actually understand that and be fixed on it. So that's the tricky part, being fixed on it. So we look around ourselves and we see this material world. And it seems very solid, it seems very real. If we fall down on the ground, it hurts. And we find that things that we need have to be purchased with money. That takes difficulty to get that money. And we take the world at face value, that There are these various items in the world all around us, various objects, and we utilize them and take advantage of them in various different ways. And this seems to be what everybody calls life. And most people, that's the sum and substance of their life. From the beginning to the end, it's assessing, utilizing, and taking advantage of various objects in the external world, all of which seem solid, all of which seem real, all of which appear to have substance. But there's something funny about this, and that is that this is not at all what's going on. It appears to be what's going on, and most people do not ever question that this is what's going on. But actually, something else is going on. What's going on is a living entity is playing a game that he is God in a world that's not real, that's changing all the time. And depending on how much he either accidentally works in accordance with Vedic principles and how much he or she works out of accordance with Vedic principles, they get karma. And this karma comes back and causes various kinds of suffering and sometimes some enjoyment as well. That's what's actually going on. And the living entity needs to wake up to the fact. However, our good friend, false ego, has a plan. And the false ego is going to figure out newer and newer ways to trick us into believing that, nope, that's actually what's going on. We have a world full of objects, and we're supposed to assess those objects, decide which ones are useful, and use them, and therefore enjoy in the material world because it's substantive and it's apparently eternal. So that's what's going on, and the false ego keeps convincing us of this. But some of us have at some time made the mistake of running into a devotee, and now we have actually discovered that this is a complete false rendering of what's going on in the world, that we have discovered it's wrong. And to some extent, not only have we discovered it, but we also have had enough of the emptiness and being kicked around by the material energy that we wanted an alternative. However, when we engage in Krishna consciousness, we hear all these words about Krishna being the supreme, about devotional service, about faith. We hear about yajna or sacrifice. We hear about transcendental knowledge, all these kinds of things. And to some extent, greater or lesser, the mind may connect, but the rest of the self is not connecting. The emotions don't connect. The attitudes don't connect. Our habits don't connect. And that's where the difficulty of Krishna consciousness comes in, is to connect up all those other things that are not automatically connected when we theoretically understand Krishna consciousness. So we see that sometimes people hear about Krishna consciousness and they immediately become Krishna conscious. I think Gopal Champu was talking about this yesterday, that how long does it take to become Krishna conscious? You can become Krishna conscious in a moment, or you can fail to do so in an entire lifetime or even numbers of lifetimes. So why is that? It has to do with faith, shraddha, and it has to do with doubts, samshaya. So, shraddha means that, it means something different than commonly understood in the English language. Shraddha, or faith in the English language, the word faith, actually, the English word faith, has the connotation of placing belief in something against what the senses seem to tell us otherwise. So the senses tell us one thing, but we intellectually place faith in something in a different way. And so this is why in the English-speaking world, the word faith has this connotation of blind faith, that we have to throw away what we actually see, or at least throw away our reasoning. And to some extent, in the Vedic understanding, we also have to do this, because as we just said, the material world appears to be a solid place where one can enjoy when it actually isn't. And there appears to be no God in the material world, but there actually is. And so some things are not the way they look. However, Shraddha has a more complex meaning in the Sanskrit, where it means also to focus on things, not just that we think about them or intellectually understand them, but we focus on them. In other words, continually focus on them, which is where we get this idea of here Prabhupada's talking about the yoga systems. And there's a parallel between the Ashtanga, or commonly understood yoga system of yam, niyam, asana, pratyahara, pranayam, etc., that system, and the bhakti yoga system, which is different. But in both cases, one is focusing. The yogi, the meditational yogi, focuses by withdrawing the senses and focusing the breathing and the mind on the breathing. That's how the meditational yogi does. The bhakti yogi does something similar, but it's in method it's very different. The bhakti yogi engages in 9 practices, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, etc., engages in these 9 practices to constantly be thinking that I am servant of Krishna and acting as servant of Krishna. So both are focusing, or have faith, both are concentrating. And as Prabhupada says, if one concentrates as the meditational yogi does, but doesn't come to the platform of realizing Krishna and giving in service and focusing on Krishna, then that yogi is wasting his time. The bhakti yogi is ahead of the game, because the bhakti yogi already understands Krishna, and that's the purpose of bhakti yogi, not to be a devotee of one of the demigods or to be a devotee of the Brahman. One is to be a devotee of the Supreme Lord, and that Supreme Lord we learn is Krishna. So now back to the concept that we're focusing. But some of us find it easier to focus than others. And we find it easier to focus on some things and less easy to focus on other things. And this boils out to our previous habits and our previous desires, and particularly our previous bad karma. That's why sometimes people hear about Krishna consciousness and they try to take it seriously, but they already have some kind of serious problem with drugs, or they have a mind that's so crazy that they really can't even get into it hardly. Or others, they hear about Krishna consciousness and they are so negative on anything that has a religious overtone that they can't even entertain it in their mind for a moment, and they just move on by. You know, they're those people that when you're on Sankirtan, you walk up and they just tell you, get out of my face. You know, they just move on. Sometimes they don't even look at you. Sometimes they sneer. They look at you that way and they just move on. Because, now, why is it that one person will stop and hear about Bhagavad Gita, another person will do that? again, it's the past habits, our past emotional connections and commitments to things, and how much the false ego has made an effort to connect us with the material world and its so-called allurements. So how do we get free? The easiest way to get free is to chant Hare Krishna, but you have to be convinced to do that. And even if you are convinced of doing that and may have been initiated and pledged to chant 16 rounds a day, you may still find it hard to actually cope with the concept of chanting Hare Krishna every day. Again, this is owing to our past, our karma, and again to doubts. So what is a doubt? It's not just a misconception. We conceive of one thing as being something, but it's actually something else. It's not just that. A doubt is also an emotional bearing upon a concept or an activity. You know, if somebody came in the room and said, "Hey, let's try something. Let's all fast for the next 4 days," you know, we might think, well, you know, this could be a good idea, a good chance to do extra hearing and chanting. But what would be our emotional reaction to that? You know, we would think, my God, you know, it's never going to work. I'll die before that happens, you know. So this is, in one sense, a doubt. We have an idea, but we have an attitude towards it. So there's an idea and an attitude towards it. And this doubt is strong enough that it veers us away from doing the thing. So we have the same thing when we try to chant. We think, oh, here we go, 2 hours. I'm just getting started now. I haven't chanted my first Haribol. So you know, already there's this kind of doubt, this attitude. And this is, again, coming from our past, how much we've ignored Krishna, how we've been totally absorbed in ideas and our own plan for what the world is, and finding our own material resources that we'll enjoy in various ways. So because of all this, we have a kind of negativity or a doubt. Of course, the only way to get around that is to continue to try to chant in spite of that. And this is what's difficult. So it's really interesting because yesterday I was giving class again on Shrimad Bhāgavatam, and Krishna talks about the same basic thing, that transcendental knowledge is the mature fruit of mysticism or of anything. And in the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, from verse about 24, 25, all the way up to about 29 or 30, somewhere there, Krishna gives 10 examples of various kinds of what he calls sacrifice, yagyas. So sacrifice of brahmacharya, sacrifice of becoming a householder, sacrifice of controlling the breathing, the sacrifice of reading the Vedas, the sacrifice of performing austerities, the sacrifice of being celibate, the sacrifice of worshiping demigods. These various things Krishna gives. And so why is he talking about these things? Because by performing these sacrifices, a person comes to the point of knowledge. And by knowledge, Krishna means transcendental knowledge. And by transcendental knowledge, Krishna means to know that you are Krishna's servant, and that's what's going to make you happy, and everything else doesn't matter. That's knowledge. It's, you've graduated. You're at the highest position. We can give you your diploma now. That Krishna is the highest thing, the only thing that matters. And if you serve Krishna, you're home. That's it. You don't need to know anything else. But we see that our false ego doesn't let us get away with that. We have these doubts or negative emotional, whatever they are, you know. So this is why we have to continue. And the quickest way to plow through them is to engage in chanting the holy name with attention. If we do that, that will melt those doubts the most quick way. Because if you're chanting properly, you are focusing on Krishna moment to moment, and it's a mystical process. It's inside, and it's very difficult to do. But if you do that, Krishna is bestowing the purification, removing those doubts, removing that emotional hesitancy, because all of us are ruled by our emotions. We can't just throw them away. So we have to deal with them. And the way to deal with them is to perform devotional service. Of course, just by performing devotional service of any kind, whether it's hearing a Bhagavatam class or being on the altar or chanting the holy name or trying to explain to somebody what Krishna consciousness is and why they should buy a book. All these things are focusing on Krishna. But of course, the most intense of all those practices is Harinam, chanting the holy name. So if we can do that, we have distilled and we've gone to the best bang for our buck that we can get out of any activity in Krishna consciousness. If we could do that all day long, we'd become pure devotees in practically a matter of days. But because when we actually chant, we space around and we find it very, very difficult. That's why Prabhupada didn't have us just chant 64 rounds and that's it, you know. Instead, he had us do all these other things. However, we should know that if we can get used somehow or other to this idea that I'm chanting, I should be focusing on it, as our Gopal Champu was mentioning yesterday. So, you know, if we can just come to that point earlier rather than later, you know, I'm here to say that it took me 30 years to get there, and I'm hoping you all will figure it out instead of having to go through 30 years of pretending to be a Hare Krishna and pretending to take chanting seriously, but not really, you know. There's no one going to benefit except you. And the quicker you come to that realization, do whatever it takes, and you struggle with it, then the quicker everything will come into place. And you will see you're not the body. This material world is like styrofoam. It's changing at every moment. And just like styrofoam, you could sit down and have a whole plate of styrofoam with some gravy on it, and it wouldn't taste like anything. But that's what this material world is like. So rather, we should focus on the internal, on chanting Krishna's name. And if we do, Krishna will gradually do the magic in our lives, and we'll begin to see things the way that the Shastra sees them. Otherwise, we'll see them the way everybody else sees them. Material world out there, it's real, it's solid, I like it, this is what I want to do, this is how I'm going to do it. So, in Bhagavad Gita 439, we have Krishna explaining that the faithful man who is determined to get transcendental knowledge controls the senses, and such a person certainly achieves transcendental knowledge. And having achieved transcendental knowledge, he becomes peaceful. So that's that verse, you know. So there we find out faithful. And of course, Rupa Goswami, as Prabhupada also quotes, Ado Shraddha Tatu Sadhu Sangha. So the whole tree starts from Shraddha. First there is Adao, that's what Adao means in the beginning. Shraddha, then sadhu sangha, association with devotees, then bhajana kriya, engaging in actual devotional activities. We usually talk about taking initiation and engaging in the practice of bhakti. That's bhajana kriya. And then it goes up to bhava. So here Prabhupada is mentioning the word bhava in this verse. And I looked it up in Monier Williams, and holy tamale, there are over like more than 50 definitions for the word bhava. It's just all over the map, just to give you a taste. Becoming, being, existing, occurring, turning, transition into, continuance, state, condition, rank, true condition, truth, reality, manner, nature, temperament, character, state of body, thinking, feeling, willing, opinion, disposition, intention, passion, emotion, conjecture, supposition, purport, meaning, sense, love, affection, attachment. It goes on, but that word has got a lot of possible meanings. So, what's that? This is the Monier Williams, what usually people go to for translation of Sanskrit words into English. There's the Amara Kosh and a few others, but I don't. Anyway, that's a whole other subject. The point here, of course, is that bhava here means emotion. Emotion to who? To the Supreme Being, to Krishna, bhava. And that is the stage 8, just before 9, which is prema in Rupa Goswami's list. We have Shraddha, Sadhu Sangha, Tata Bhajana Kriya, Narta Nivritis, Nishta Ruchis, etc., etc. So we get up to bhava. And this is all done by focusing the mind. But the mind doesn't want to focus. Okay, so we have to try to focus it anyways, even though it don't want to. You have to still try to focus it. And eventually it gets easier because Krishna helps. If we somehow make progress in thinking of Krishna more, especially when we're chanting our japa, everything else will become much, much easier. And Krishna will help us, and we'll start to see, hey, I took this material world so seriously. Even as a devotee, I took it so seriously. Even as a devotee, I had plans. And even as a devotee, I was serious about those plans when actually maybe they weren't such a big deal anyway. But now we're starting to destroy and gradually melt away those negative emotional relationships that we have with aspects of Krishna consciousness, surrendering to Krishna, doing what Krishna wants, understanding Krishna, trying to hear Krishna's name when we're chanting, etc., etc. So all these things can be gradually purified out. And eventually we can come to the stage of bhava. So faith is there, and of course doubt is also there. And in 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the very first verse, where Krishna is saying, that how you can know me, I will tell you what's the best knowledge, knowing which will bring you beyond doubt, asamshaya samagramam yanta gyasasi tatshanu. Just hear. So by hearing about Krishna, by chanting about Krishna, which is what this verse is discussing here, hearing and chanting, if we do those things, we will gradually become free from doubt. We will become purified, and that will result in transcendental knowledge. So the mature fruit of all kinds of yajna, or the mature fruit of all of our activities, is to bring us to the stage of transcendental knowledge, which is the knowledge that I am Krishna's service. That is the real thing, and there's nothing more to be said about it. And let me try to serve Krishna. If I do that, I'll actually be happy, believe it or not. Believe it or not. All right, so I'm going to stop there and see if there are questions or comments. And we have the microphone somewhere. The one that's sometimes there and sometimes not there. It went on a walk. Okay, in that case, we're going to... Oh, okay. Okay. If that wasn't there, I have my own microphone here for the sake of... Good.
So you mentioned that verse from chapter 4 and also the verse in the Bhagavatam today. And we have a similar connection where like the Bhagavatam verse today is talking about you must practice the controlling process of the yoga system and that's how you become faithful. And this one says you subdue your senses and then you achieve knowledge and attain peace. And a faithful man does that. And then the famous verse from Chaitanya Charitamrita about faith, Shraddha Shabde Vishwas Kahi Shrujija Nishchoy Krishna Bhakti Kaili Sarva Karma Krita Hoy. Shraddha, or faith, is confident, firm faith that by rendering transcendental loving service to Krishna, one automatically performs all subsidiary activities. Such faith is favorable to the discharge of devotional service. So my question is, what's the connection between the controlling process of the yoga system, or like subduing the senses, and then getting this faith?
Yeah.
It seems to be connected somehow.
Right, they are. Everything's connected, by the way. Any two things you name, they're connected in some way. And of course, the most obvious way they're connected is they're part of Krishna. So everything is part of Krishna. So whatever you can mention is a part of Krishna. Whatever else you can mention is also a part of Krishna. So they're connected. Anyway, the point here is that controlling the senses means to modify our desires and our habits, which takes energy and it goes against our material conditioning. So it's an energy consuming process rather than an energy generating process. It's an uphill fight rather than a downhill roll, you know. So that's the difficulty of Krishna consciousness in a long time. But through controlling the senses become less wild. And when they become less wild, one sees things more clearly, and one sees things more clearly. One can be more faithful or more focused. And what was exactly your question?
Well, basically, both the verses, there's some sort of connection between subduing the senses or using the yoga method of controlling the senses, and somehow that will help augment your faith.
Right. So whichever way you control the senses, whether you control them through meditational yoga or you control them through bhakti yoga, that will give you faith. But the question is, faith in what? If you're doing it on a material level, which Prabhupada explained, yesterday we talked about this in Gita from Zero, that if you're performing these various kinds of yagyas, whether it's the controlling of the breathing or whatever, and you don't have a spiritual objective, Prabhupada in the purport of 442, the very last verse of the fourth chapter of Bhagavad Gita, in that purport, Prabhupada explains that there's two kinds of, doing of yajna. One is for material purpose, and one is for a transcendental purpose. Or he puts it that one is to give up one's possessions, and one is to actually gain transcendental knowledge, should be fixed in transcendental knowledge. And he talks about how to engage in any activity without the objective of pleasing the Supreme Lord. It will give you some kind of material benefit, but you're not getting any real spiritual benefit from it. So if one performs yoga, but the purpose of that yoga is just to become possessed of one of the mystic cities, or one wants to merge with Brahman, or one wants to meet some demigod, or whatever other thing you're doing through the yoga, you may get some material benefit, but it's ultimately useless. However, if one is fixing the senses, and the easiest way to fix the senses is to point them at Krishna, as opposed to point them at the void, or point them at something else, or point them at the heart, or point them at whatever. The best way is to point them at Krishna. If one does that, then you will make progress in the most substantial way, and that's real progress because it's spiritual progress. Is that's kind of the two things are related: controlling the senses and steadiness. It's also connected with knowledge. All these things are connected. Yeah.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I'm also thinking in this connection about the poor Brahmana in the Nectar of Devotion, who was using that process of self-control in order to meditate on Krishna. It's just an example. What do you think about, for devotees, I mean, like you said, it's very difficult to control the mind, especially to focus it on chanting. It's very, very hard. So shouldn't we utilize any advantage we might be able to get? Why not practice pranayama for the sake of having better chanting? What do you think about that?
I would not recommend it. In general, the idea of chanting Krishna through japa is a specific activity all of its own, and it may have some similarities to other kinds of activities. But, for someone who has spent their whole life doing yoga, maybe they would find some use and some easy way through what they've already learned. But for someone who is just trying to chant Hare Krishna, to go the route of learning some kind of pranayama just so that one can bring it back to Krishna's chanting in the chanting of Nam, chanting the holy name, I think is probably kind of a roundabout way to go. It won't help too much, In general, the reason that chanting is so difficult is because our mind is really used to pleasing itself from second to second. We're used to thinking about, what do I want to do this second? And then in the next second we think, what do I want to do that second? And in the next second, what do we want to do that second? That's what our mind's used to doing. So we're really struggling against that long-term bad habit. So I think for most devotees, what it will take to do reasonable japa is not going to be the same for everybody. So conceivably, someone could possibly make some advancement by studying pranayama, but it seems like something that's kind of a roundabout thing, whereas just struggling with trying to hear the holy name and doing whatever it takes, standing up or walking or sitting down or being in a closed room, being with people or not being with people, or trying one thing to see if it works, trying something else if it doesn't work. But you have to be, I think, very pragmatic about it. And if you're trying many different things to see what it will take to improve your japa, believe me, Krishna's going to eventually sniff it out for you. You'll finally say, oh, that's what it was all along. If I just start doing that, my japa gets better. And for someone else, it might be something else, But we all have our, whatever it is that's standing in the way of our Krishna consciousness. And if we wrestle with it enough and we keep banging at it, eventually Krishna's going to say, all right, so here it is. You got better japa now, and you have better japa. That's a long ways on the road to making progress in every other aspect of your Krishna consciousness. Yeah.
And one more question, and actually be interested to hear your experience with this. It's true, right? I mean, that preaching, when you engage yourself in preaching work, whether that's intense kind of book distribution or trying to cultivate other people, do you find that gives you a leg up, gives you a shortcut to getting taste for the holy name?
If you do what?
Does it give you a shortcut to get taste for the holy name? Does it help with getting taste for the holy name?
Is there a shortcut for the taste?
Yeah, is preaching a shortcut? And what's your experience with that?
A preaching shortcut. I'm trying to understand what you're trying to say.
By preaching Krishna consciousness, even though we're neophytes,
Right.
but we're still trying to preach Krishna consciousness, do we get faster a taste for the holy name? Does Krishna give a faster a taste for the holy
Well,
name?
yeah, I think in general, especially if you're doing book distribution, that's something that makes Krishna have special attention for you, because Prabhupada laid such emphasis on it. So that will help. But it's something that we shouldn't just think will happen automatically, because I've spent enough years thinking it was going to happen automatically, and it doesn't, believe me. You just eventually get into, one of two things will happen over the years. One of them is you'll eventually get better at japa, or you'll eventually get crummier at japa. And you'll join what I call the used to chant Hare Krishna movement, which is a dangerous movement to go to. And there's lots of people in the used to chant Hare Krishna movement. People who chanted for many, many years, took initiation, et cetera, and just at some point said, I'm not getting anywhere with this. I'm just going to do service. And that's kind of like cutting the lifeline there. Although you appear to be in the society of devotees, you appear to be doing things like everybody else is doing them, but you're part of the used to chant Hare Krishna movement. And until you come around to recognizing you're not going to be able to go back home, back to Godhead if you don't perfect your chanting. I mean, it's a stubborn reality, nothing's going to change it. So you have to kind of come to terms with it and figure out, well, how can I gradually increase the quality of my chanting? Why do I always find something else? Why do I always feel like I need to be somewhere else? Why, when I chant, as I forget who was saying it the other day, it was our Arjuna Nanda. He was giving a class, that was about 2 weeks ago or something, where he said, the bliss I feel in japa is knowing the last bead gets put down, and I've done my 16. That's where I finally feel bliss, And these are just realities. It's not like you're going to go to hell tomorrow because you think like that. But it's something that you do have to take seriously. That eventually you have to think, why do I actually feel like that? Again, it's that doubt. We have a thing, we want to chant Hare Krishna, but we have an emotional response that's contrary or negative. And if we keep working at it, we say, please, Krishna, let me just do this one way or the other. Let me just stay focused a little bit longer today. Let me whatever. Eventually, Krishna will give us the breakthrough of helping us figure out what it is that will take to make my japa better. And this is a long ways down the road to actually becoming really Krishna conscious. Okay, so today we are going to try to end on time because of our temple president made the announcement that prasadam needs to be on time so everybody can be there to move stuff out of the restaurant or the cafe to get the floor polished. All right, thank you all very much for your kind attention. All glories to Shrimad Bhāgavatam. All glories to the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. Hare Krishna.